jump right in. Today on the Come Up with Katia, I'm joined by Kelly Groehler. She has a deep experience in the public relations world and currently is the CEO of Alice Riot, which I want you to get into and describe because I'm gonna butcher what this like really, really cool company is. But in general, it's a fine art licensing and consulting agency that focuses on women artists and Web3 properties. Is that right? Is that the right term in the Web3 world?
It's actually not the right term, but that's okay because everything is so early that no one really knows what the right term should be right now.
Okay.
So
what is the right term?
I'm frankly, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I can't, it's interesting because we spend a lot of time talking about what life was like back in 2007, where there were these new platforms called Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and others, and there were others that didn't make it to the top. And I recall back then, we're trying to figure out what are these called? Is this a chat forum? Is this a commerce site? What is it supposed to be? And I think that where we're at with this idea of Web3 technologies and what they enable, like this idea of a metaverse or metaverses, which is more accurate, really. There is no one single metaverse yet. It's a series of different metaverses out there. And it's really hard to articulate, I think, in common language. Well, what does that mean to the average person? Mm-hmm. The best example I've found so far, and I actually gave my book away. It's required reading for our team. It's called Navigating the Metaverse, and it's by a woman by the name of Kathy Hackle.
Okay.
I recommend starting there because she starts to frame out this idea of Web3 is going to be all about immersive experiences and ownership of your data.
Okay.
Which are very broad concepts.
Very different.
So, we're in the space because we have this, we have artists we work with. Our whole purpose is to help women artists grow. That's what Alice Riot is about. And we're going to look at all sorts of channels outside of the traditional art world to do that. The metaverse and what its potential is really exciting in terms of women having the ability to grow financially and be successful in their art practice through these technologies.
That's huge.
The rub, if you will, and this comes more from the tech side, is that everything in terms of these rules for Web3, crypto, the metaverses have been largely defined by tech bros, white dudes.
Right.
And they've designed it for themselves. They didn't design something that was welcoming to an average person. And I've had a couple of experiences as an art collector coming in to participate on an NFT drop for an artist that I support in the real world from an art standpoint. And the NFT purchasing experience was so frustrating. And it was like trying to read a VHS manual or a VCR manual back in the 80s. It was like, what? I don't understand this. So everything I think right now with what's happening on that technology front, crypto has crashed. NFTs of artwork have lost over 80% of their value since the start of 2022. And so I think right now is the period of, okay, let's just sit back.
What are we doing?
Let's chill. Let's see what emerges on the next side of this and let's be ready for it. So if you've got an entrepreneurial mindset and you're all about failure and learn from your failures, big, huge failures this year on that front. And that's okay.
Where did your interest in that whole world start to blossom from?
Necessity. My whole career in PR, and it really kicked off around 1996, has been entirely around technology, supply chain, and how consumers use technology.
Okay.
Really, that sums it up. And so I've watched, everything from when we had RFID tags on shipments from China and Walmart was embracing them. And that was like a big, huge deal. And then Y2K and yada, yada, yada. Blockchain ended up becoming something that a client of mine was starting to explore blockchain for use in food and agriculture. And so we had to spend time helping them articulate how to unveil this at the World Economic Forum in Davos, which means we had to get up to speed very quickly on what it was not, And then how do you translate that for an average person? And what's that going to mean for business?
Because how do you talk to people? I mean, again, like I don't fully understand it. So how do you translate that to like a normal person to be like, oh, okay, I A, understand this, and B, am interested in exploring and making this a part of my life. So interesting.
And right now it's, everything is, it's a lot of fun because it's visionary. Imagine the potential. Imagine the potential of us having a virtual art district, and your avatar can walk around in our art galleries within this art district, and you can buy, an NFT of a work of art that you see in that virtual gallery. But lo and behold, that smart contract behind that NFT also like sets rules for, if you go to resell it, how much does the royalty go back to the artist? Oh, and it's also a certificate of authenticity for an original work that's out there in the physical world. All of these things are so cool, and the potential is great. And there are so many problems with the technology. I wrote an open letter to the art world back in May. And one of the things I did in this is I broke down my experience as an art collector buying an NFT and how much energy was used for this one transaction. And because the energy use with crypto, because crypto is all digital, so making one transaction with a Bitcoin at the time was like the equivalent of 3 months of energy to power the average US home. I'm not kidding on these stats. They're out there.
That's
Using
insane.
Ethereum was like 3.5 days of energy to power a house. So it's better than Bitcoin, but still pretty lousy.
Yeah.
But there's some cool things out there. There's something called the Stellar Network, and it is a blockchain platform that interacts with all the other blockchain platforms. So you can exchange different currencies on it. You can also exchange fiat government issued currency through it. So if you want to just use a credit card, those types of platforms are going to open it up for consumers. Mm-hmm. Because, telling me that I have to sit on Discord or Telegram, and I barely know what those things are. And all I'm trying to do is buy a piece of art. And then I'm getting mansplained essentially that, well, you didn't give us the right wallet address. And I'm like, well, why are there two different wallets for this one piece? Like,
right.
There's nothing that's been built so far that is about, let's bring you along. Let's guide you through this. Let's make it easier for you.
Yeah. It still feels like a secret club
out there
in a way. It's you're just like, I don't know. It doesn't, with so much going on in everyone's everyday life, if you're not like passionate about it and passionate about something that you want to purchase, such as like an NFT art collecting piece, like it seems hard to interpret and get into.
Oh yeah. And it's also, frankly, not built for women.
Yeah, okay.
It's not.
How do you really build tech for women? Like how do you define that?
I care immensely about my experience. And it's nothing new. I mean, 20 years ago, we were looking at data at Best Buy that women were influencing 90% of all consumer electronics purchase decisions. So maybe the guy was the one picking out the big screen TV, but the role of the influence of the woman in the equation was highly influential. You're talking up at the 90% level.
Yeah.
But we could not get, and I say marketing writ large, we couldn't get marketing or merchandising to shift the focus away from tech dudes because everything was about latest and greatest features and functions. Women are more designed for, we want to understand what the experience is.
Right.
We want to be able to see ourselves in the experience. We want to feel good about participating in the experience. We don't want to be made to feel stupid. Mm-hmm. And that's not what technology is. That's not how it really goes. Yeah. And so I'm interested to see like women like Kathy Hackle. There's great women's groups out there that are building around women in Web3, and how do we help bring others along? So our hope is that they will continue to be influential while we look at, okay, how do we bring people from the art world into this space?
Well, it's a really interesting space too, because in a way, like you said, if you're like eliminating women from the initial experience of something like a Web3, they're also missing out on potential early income opportunities that we're gonna, the men are really capitalizing on. So that's a whole other.
That's so interesting when I think about the NFT art world. because it's not the same as the physical world, art world. You're seeing more and more coming in to the space, more the early adopters.
Yeah.
But when we look at some of the data, like on artwork sold as NFTs in 2021, fewer than 18% of all of those NFT sales were by women artists. And it's also similar in terms if you look at demographics, communities of color, artists of color. And then you look at women of color as artists, they're at the
non-existent. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the art world that has been out there so far in terms of NFTs, it was being defined by technologists, developers who started posting JPEGs and calling them art.
Right.
And
selling them for like a crazy amount.
Oh yeah. There's one in particular that drives me crazy. It drives me crazy because it shows that we go, it's like hearing Jeffrey Goldblum's voice in your ears saying, you were so eager to figure out if you could that you didn't stop to think if you should.
Yeah.
I've got a major problem with Bored Apes. Bored Apes is considered it's one of the hottest NFT pieces of art you can own. If you own an ape, this thing is worth tons of money, even though they've taken a huge dip.
But why? Like, what makes it valuable?
I think that they got venture capital backing. So Andreessen Horowitz is behind Bored Apes. They got in early with Christie's in terms of, integration in, from a traditional art world standpoint. They got celebrities like Snoop Dogg and Eminem that got involved with these. Like Snoop Dogg and Eminem did a performance at the Video Music Awards earlier this month as Bored Apes. So there was a metaverse experience of them performing as Bored Apes while they were on stage physically. Okay. Now, for all of the things that are really good and cool about that, my problem with Bored Apes, which now you can get on M&Ms because now they've got a licensing partnership with M&Ms. So there's Bored Apes M&Ms.
So the whole thing, yeah.
I look at the Bored Apes though, the original NFTs, and I'm like, did anybody check back on art history before thinking that this was a good idea to do? When I look at Bored Apes, and I mean this sincerely, I see early 20th century caricatures that are demoralizing and diminishing Jewish people and people like Black people.
Wow.
Like when you think, I find them offensive. They remind me of propaganda that was used in the early 20th century to further marginalize Blacks in America, further marginalize Jewish people in Europe leading up to World War II. I'm like, did anybody go to the Holocaust museums or like at the War Museum in London and look at these things and go, so I know some people will go, well, it's like Gorillaz, the music
band,
group,
yeah,
and what it kind of leans toward that. And I'm like, yeah, but I think sometimes we have to think it again. The whole art world is about critique and thought and significance and symbolism and meaning. It's not just because the colors are cool. And so I don't know. I've got that one still bugs me. And I look at how rapidly it's moved forward in terms of consumer adoption and celebrity built around it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't feel that good about that one.
You have like a background in PR. So you're like, this is a PR thing, like clearly, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's, and my favorite like general rule about PR is there is a gap between what you want to say and what people need to hear. And you need to mind the gap. Right. That's what doing good PR is about. And I don't know how that gap was minded other than really building, they call it pumping in the crypto space. We're going to pump this up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It feels kind of gross. Yeah. So where did your like love for art and collecting art first start manifesting itself?
So, and you're from Minnesota.
I am from Minnesota. I got my Prince shirt on.
I noticed that. All hail the Prince.
Yeah.
Where in Minnesota did you grow up?
Minneapolis.
You are in Minneapolis. Okay.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very, very, very small town in Southwest Minnesota called Adrian. And it's like on Interstate 90 in between Worthington and Laverne on your way to Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Okay.
And about 1,000 people back then, still about 1,000 people live there. Big farm community. Mm-hmm. I'm not a farmer. Like I was the kid who had to go with a face mask to my girlfriend's chicken farm because I was allergic to the dust.
Oh my God.
I
So
was
you're like, I
doing face
can't leave
masks
quicker.
before we had to.
Yeah.
My father was the police chief in Adrian when I was a kid. And it's so funny because I watched Stranger Things, and Hopper I'm like, oh my God, that's like a culmination of all the cops I ever knew as a kid who worked with my dad. Oh my God. It's so accurate, authentic. But my dad had a fine art degree. So
really,
he ended up becoming a police officer. This was in the early 70s because he needed to make money. He had a family.
Right.
But yeah, he had a college degree in fine art. And so
was he an artist himself?
Yeah, he was. And I have, he passed away in 2005, and I have a sizable number of his canvases upstairs in our house. He did a lot of abstract work. He was highly influenced by Jackson Pollock. So he liked to do a lot of paint flick things. And we weren't in a place where we got to museums very often. And so a lot of my love of art came from that side from my dad, because I had all of his college textbooks, and I would read through them, and I would, learn about the different artists. He continued to practice art in different ways. He had his own woodworking shop and did a lot of different things there. And then my mother's side of the family, she was adopted in the 50s, but she was adopted by a family tied to the White Earth Band of Ojibwe up in northern Minnesota by Monoman.
Yeah.
And so my mom's side of the family is all Ojibwe and French Canadian.
Oh, that's
everything
awesome.
From quilting to
beadwork.
They did all of it. So I was surrounded by art all the time, but not in the in that economic model of the galleries and the museums. I didn't have a lot of access to those, and certainly didn't have the internet or anything, because this is in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
We were the first house, however, in town to get cable. So I was the first kid to get MTV.
Oh my God.
And
you're the coolest kid in the small town, for sure.
I still want my MTV. I love my MTV.
That it's really cool, like growing up in Minnesota, that I think people don't realize too is, the exposure and experience with like native beadwork and quilting and things like that's things that I definitely remember growing up being surrounded by, that I think is unique in a sense to like the Northern Midwest environments too.
Yeah. And I think that we're in a period now where appreciation for Indigenous cultures is on the rise.
Yes.
About time. Also paying attention to some of the real challenges with Indigenous cultures, like missing women and girls not being reported. That's a big problem. And then I don't know if you saw, but Awamni, which is a restaurant here in the Twin Cities, just was named best restaurant in America by, I believe it was the James Beard Foundation.
Wow.
And so
I haven't been yet, but I've heard great things, of course.
Oh, I went for the first time last week, blown away, because they entirely source the food from an Indigenous perspective. They don't even use black pepper, because black pepper was brought to the US by the colonizers. And so the food is just absolutely incredible. And
what'd you have?
100% from his perspective and his culture.
That's awesome. What'd you have?
I had wild rice 3 different ways, and I love wild rice.
I love wild rice. My mom ships it to me in LA.
Yeah. Well, my mom's side of the family, they give it as Christmas gifts. So I'm spoiled. I don't have to buy it in the store because it's ridiculously priced up.
It is.
I ended up, even our dessert. So we ended up having a bison steak, which was incredible. And then among the other things, we had elk tartare, and then we had a wild rice ice cream for dessert.
Huh.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
Amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
So check it out in Minneapolis. I love that. Okay. So back to art.
Yes.
So you're obviously like very influenced in it. And when did you start collecting though yourself?
I started collecting, and I'm looking over at them right now. I started collecting by way of that connection with MTV.
Okay. So at a very young age.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I was collecting Nagel posters when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And now I find originals and I purchase them, and I'm actually running out of space, and you can see it, I think, right there. That's my latest Nagel poster, and I don't have any place to put it. So,
Love it.
So that it started then. And then moving into college and, took different art classes, but I was really going in that mass communications direction. My first real pieces came from, first of all, my dad, and when he passed away, getting access to those canvases. And then I left a job and they gave me a poster that had been I'd been at this agency for 10 years, and it had every time they would move your office, they would move the artwork with you, which was kind of cool. And the agency founder was an art collector. And there was this poster for an art gallery show in 1963 in New York. It was a Roy Lichtenstein show at Leo Castelli Gallery, which I had read about, in my dad's textbooks. And I was like, oh, this is great. And so they gave that to me as a going away present.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Well, it turns out that Lichtenstein himself made those posters because he was a struggling younger artist back in 1963. This was only his second ever gallery show in New York. And so he created the posters, and the artwork that's on the posters you will never find it anywhere except on these posters.
Wow.
And so that was my first get this insured
artwork
piece. Yeah. I tend to follow though my likes and I have an aesthetic that is, it crosses several different genres in art. I have an appreciation for the masters. I don't like that they're called masters. I don't like that they dominate all of the museum shows. And most often when you see women in art, they are muses or subjects or worse. Mm-hmm. By the way, in fact, it's right down here. Great book that just came out called The History of Art Without Men by Katie Hessel.
I saw that on your Instagram.
She's done collaborations with Dior, and she's gonna break this wide open for us. I have faith. But I tend to go toward the things that I like.
Yeah. Which is the best way to collect art, by the way, for anyone watching.
Or having something that means something to you.
Of course.
Like this piece. Would I have picked out? No, I would not have picked this out. But there's a great story where I met a stranger in New York back in 2012. I was sitting at Leal, Anthony Bourdain's restaurant, just sitting at the bar eating dinner by myself. This guy came in with this canvas under his arm. I mean, it's like a sitcom or something.
Yeah.
He sat down next to me and through our conversation, he at the time I had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. Stage 1, kicked its ass, moving on.
Love it.
But at the time, that's where I was at. I had just received this news. And when he heard it, he's like, oh, she'll watch over you. And he walked out. And I'm like, what does that mean? And then it was 15 minutes later, I was getting up to leave. And right there is the canvas. He left it for me.
Oh my God. That's the sweetest thing I've ever heard.
I know. And the best part was that in pencil, he had his name and his address and phone number in New York written on the back, not leave. It's just what he did with his art. And so he and I stay in touch.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's so sweet. I love that.
I like Cleopatra.
Is that her name?
Yeah.
Cleo.
That's Cleopatra.
What's up, Cleo? I love that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So throughout this entire art collecting journey in college, learning about everything, were you very aware and conscious of the lack of women artists, or was it just something that progressed as you got older?
I am ashamed to say that no, I did not really start paying attention to the role of women writ large in terms of how awful it is in terms of inequity for women until I got probably to 30. And by that point, I had, I was a total punk when I was in high school, but then something happened. And I want to say that it was just social expectations, culture, and I just went with the flow where by the time I was a senior in high school, I was a cheerleader. What? And I had, I wanted to be an MTV VJ. That was, the path I wanted to go.
Love it.
And I was I had
who did it?
I had applied to schools like Emerson and Boston accepted me in these places. And I had a mother who was very much about traditional roles and, you got to go this way. And so I ended up making choices and decisions in my late teens and early 20s that put me at a place. By the time I was 29, I was steeped in this corporate career, focused entirely on climbing a ladder that wasn't even built for me, was divorced from my first marriage because I went and was like, oh yeah, let's do this. Everybody, all my other friends are getting married.
Yeah.
And, a wedding with 600 guests. Oh my God. I was 23 years old. I was 23 years old. It was like all of these things that happened, and I hold no ill will toward anyone from that period, except for myself, because I was like, you totally turned your back on yourself in terms of what you were really like.
Right.
And what you were really inspired by. Like, you sold yourself out to, again, corporate ladder. And I stayed on that corporate ladder until my early 40s, when I finally got to the very top and realized, oh my God, you don't get rewarded for breaking stuff at the top. You get rewarded for polishing that ball and a reasonable rate of return. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. And so I bailed.
When you were in
that
space, corporate. But when you were in that space though, did you know that you were unhappy, or were you just kind of going through the motions? And yeah.
I was going through the motions. And I will tell you, it is hard to watch videos back in the 90s, whether it's like literal music videos or TV shows or something, or movies. And I'm like, what the hell was I doing? And I'm like mad at myself going, damn it, you missed out on this. I should have been in Seattle, like in the mosh pit, seeing Nirvana before they were Nirvana. I mean, it was like, what were you doing?
Okay.
And so, it was more of like, I started to recognize it in my 30s. I fell genuinely in love and got married, and we have he's now 20, our son. So in my 30s, I was raising a kid, but I have a partner who is like unwavering supportive,
which is number one.
Yeah. And even when I was still in corporate and was traveling everywhere, and he never once was like, you're leaving me with the duties at home or the parenting. He was like, this is what you do, go do it.
Yeah.
And so when I finally cracked, I'm like, I can't do this corporate thing anymore. He's like, well, what do you want to do? And I think, I want to build things. I want to start things from scratch. I want to be an entrepreneur. And he's like, then go do them. And he, up to like, even this morning, he's just like, you got this, go.
What was your breaking point?
Yeah. I think my breaking point was actually after I had quit. This was in 2015. The breaking point was after I had quit, and I had been in like this endless cycle of talking to recruiters and looking at and trying to get back into corporate. And something had broken in me.
Yeah.
Where I would talk with a recruiter, and it would be a fantastic, executive level job at some great company. And I'm like, I don't like their product. I don't like their leaders. Nah. And and the job that I do, from a PR standpoint, you are an advocate. And I was so mutable, and I was so great at being a storyteller for things that I didn't really care about, but I was getting paid to do it for others essentially. And so I just, that was where I was like, I started to panic, because I'm like, I'm seeing myself going, nah, I don't want to do that. And then I've got a part of my head going, whoa, you have invested 20 years in getting to this point. What are you doing? And got to the end of 2015, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm screwed. What did I just do? I just killed everything I had built, and thinking that it was over.
So were you getting like offers and you were saying no?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and that's so hard when you're like being slapped a paycheck of benefits, like a big title, all of these
Everybody's
things.
taking care of everything for you.
Yeah.
And there are days I miss that.
Of course.
God, it would be nice.
Course.
But
but
then I'm also like, I get to totally dictate my schedule, and like, I can launch a company like Alice Riot and start off as a clothing company, because we're seeing the vision of how do you help women artists grow, and how do you connect them with collectors outside traditional art world channels. Hey, apparel is a great way to do that. So what we're doing right now in 2022 is I have such respect for product makers.
Yeah.
People who are in fashion, who work in apparel, who work in accessories, who work in, you name it, from a product standpoint. Oh God, I suck at it. I'm so bad. And I don't want to do it. that was, and so this year it was actually coming back to all of the skills I did build those first 20 years in corporate and going, okay, how do I bring those forward in service of an artist and helping her grow, take her to other product makers, take her to other experiences. And that has been bing, bing. All right, now we're going. So it's good.
So what did it look like for you in 2015 when you're saying no to all of these things and you have like a blank slate of, I want to build something? Well, that's great. But what's the first thing you write down or imagine to create for this new experience of your life?
So I had some privileged parts to that narrative in 2015. I negotiated a beautiful severance leaving that corporate job. So I didn't have to do anything, which was nice.
Which is huge.
We ended up, we were living out of state. We moved back to Minnesota. We actually moved back to Robbinsdale. My husband's like, we're going back to Robbinsdale. I'm like, okay. And, and so it was helping our son transition. He was an 8th grader. And so a lot of things were going on there. I think that while I was panicking about not getting back into, getting put back in the matrix, so to speak, I was at the same time saying yes to myself when I had ideas. And so, Alice Riot started when my co-founder, who's an artist here in the Twin Cities, Kate Iverson, posted one of her new paintings on her Instagram account. And I saw the post, and in the comment section, I wrote, I want that on a skirt. And so she went and took the file, she did a digital file of her painting, went and printed some cheap ass fabric and made me a skirt. I still have it upstairs.
Were you friends with her, or you was just like a random Instagram follower?
We were both, I actually met her through Business Journal 40 Under 40.
Okay.
So I was named 2010 and she was 2011. And so we formally met there. We also met by way of, at the time, because remember social media was so new back then. There was a woman here in the Twin Cities, Judy Carter, and she was doing this Just Judy blog.
Okay.
And it was all about what's happening with social. And she came out with a list of social media titans for 2010. And Kate and I were both on that list. And so we met through those means and had just, built an appreciation. She had helped me acquire a couple of different pieces of art that I was looking at, because she's also a consultant and curator as well as an artist. So, and we just started looking at how cool that was. And so, can we start building something on this? So I think that was that was like my first stumble forward in terms of, okay, you can go and build your own business.
Yeah.
You don't need to go back to corporate. I had enough, consulting inquiries coming my way that I set up another LLC just to do consulting. And that's been really, fantastic. I've never had to go and pitch for business. It always comes my way. And so, I think now 7 years later, I've finally kind of settled down and I'm like, okay, I can spin all these plates and keep them moving forward. But I think that the last thing in 2015, quickly, there is a group of former Best Buy executives who had launched their own retail consulting agency. And it was December 2015. I had just had my first meeting with an executive coach. And I was just like, okay, this shit's got to stop. I've got to get back into corporate. I've got to get on a path. So this leadership coach is going to help me get in that, get back into the game. And the next day, Rick from the Frosty team calls me and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, we're going to launch a startup accelerator program. You want to play with us? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I had there was nothing. There was no compensation package tied to it or nothing. It was just, we're going to build this. Do you want to play with us? And I'm like, yes. And so I've just tried to keep that mindset in front on everything that comes my way.
Okay.
And especially now with this, with Alice Riot and going in this direction, trying to say yes, or at least I'm willing to look at the things that come my way.
Right.
And also try to recognize the things that come our way are something that will be advantageous to our artists or to our business or to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a journey, and it has never been just like one thing going, aha. Although the skirt for Alice Riot probably was the
That
thing
was
that
your
really
one aha.
tripped. Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
aha.
Well, I want to fast forward a little bit because I really want to dive into this new project that you have with Alice Riot, the WTAF show. So women, travel, art, food, which obviously just talking to you the past few minutes, like you can know that these are all clearly passions of yours. But where did this concept kind of come into play with Alice Riot?
So I backed it into Alice Riot.
Okay.
So, when we were going through this exercise, probably year 2 with the company, and we had to spend time talking about how do we want to spend our time, each of us, like what ideally, if this business is successful and it's lucrative and we're in the black, how do we want to be spending our time, each of us that was on the team? And I said, how I want to spend my time is I want to travel the world, discover artists, and not discover, but for myself, discover, oh, look
Like
at these
experience.
incredible artists.
Yeah.
Find, and invite them to work with Alice Riot. And by the way, on the way, as I'm doing these things, I'm going to eat everything in my sight. Because that's me. There are very few things in the world that I don't eat. I don't eat Velveeta or Hormel chili. Yeah, I don't do those. And then when they make that chili dip together.
Yeah, wait, I kind of like that. I'm not gonna lie.
So does my husband and son, and I'm like,
I mean, like once a year at the Super Bowl, but like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna dip my chip.
Listen, give me the spinach artichoke dip and then the buffalo chicken dip. That stuff is crack. That is evil.
Oh my God.
I love that stuff. Oh yeah. So that's been my personal vision for how I want to spend my time as CEO of this company is I want to travel, meet artists, broker deals with them, and eat food. That's what I want to do.
Sounds like the best life ever.
This started. What was that?
I said it sounds like the best life ever.
That's what I'm building. That's what this is. This is all in development. I wasn't planning on doing a content series or the idea of a TV show. That was not in the plan. Mother's Day 2020, we are in lockdown. And my boys, my husband and son, are like, we're going to make you eggs in purgatory for Mother's Day, and I'm like, perfect. One of my favorite things to eat. Well, I am wide awake at 7 a.m. And they're both like, of course, knocked out.
Passed out. Right.
On a Sunday morning, they're not getting up anytime soon. And I'm like, oh, this is great. So I got my mug of coffee, and I've got my dogs, and I've got the remote control. And I'm like, what do I want to do? And I'm like, I'm going to watch some old Anthony Bourdain No Reservations episodes. And within 45 minutes, I was irritated because I started thinking about it. And I knew that there was this new show called Somebody Feed Phil.
Yep.
And David Chang was out there doing things, and Gordon Ramsay was trying to kind of step it in when, after Bourdain passed away. And, you got Andrew Zimmern doing Bizarre Foods. And I'm like, who's doing this from a woman's perspective?
So not to jump in, but I spent 3 years of my life pitching a show of a women-led sports travel show. It was exhausting. So I'm super excited for this conversation because I know the pain and the experience and the lack of visibility in the space like no one else.
We need to talk. I want to talk more with you about this.
Yeah.
This, and you have, presumably you have far more experience than I do in terms of broadcast and production and whatnot. That's not where I come from. I know the right people to call.
But I love that you're things. Like initially, because I'm a huge Bourdain fan. Like I love, absolutely love his shows. It's like one of, my house is a random array of Bourdain things and books and experiences and whatever. But I think most people don't come to the conclusion of, wow, like, why are so many travel shows and food shows all hosted by men? Especially because a lot of the consumers of the shows are women. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I learned quickly the power of the community. I had made some crack. It was after the first time I had ever watched a Phil Rosenthal, like Somebody Feed Phil episode. I watched the first episode and I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Really?
And that's produced by Bourdain's production company, 0.0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? I mean, and he's a very nice guy.
Yeah.
But essentially, he's riding on the Everybody Loves Raymond crowd. And he makes funny faces when he eats. And I'm like, that's all it took to get this?
Yeah.
And I made a comment, I think I was on Instagram. Oh, it's like the Beehive.
Ooh, they came for you?
Oh, they were like, don't you dare. He's the most wonderful guy in the world. I was like, oh, sorry. I wasn't trying to be, but yeah, that morning, Mother's Day, I'm 45 minutes in. I flip open my tablet. I'm like, all right, there has to be, okay, you have Samin Nasrat, who did Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, which was a 4-part series based on a cookbook.
Yeah.
You have Padma Lakshmi, who's tied to Top Chef. She's a well-known celebrity. She did Taste the Nation, which listening to her talk on podcasts and in interviews was more about paying attention to the immigrant culture and how significant it is to America as you're going into the polls 2020 to vote. I mean, there was a political agenda tied to that show. And then, like the Discovery Plus network, the streaming service, they had like shows from a woman, I don't even remember her name right now, who was doing some of this back in 2008. So you have a lot of people, I would say, on social media, influencers doing their own things. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the content in general that's like on there for programming and for streaming, there's a bifurcation. The guys travel and have adventures. Largely, it's the women who are in the kitchen cooking to entertain or feed their families. And then you get these crossover moments that I am strongly opinionated and I need to watch what I say about other people in the space.
No, you don't.
Well, so James May was one of the Top Gear guys in the UK.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Yes.
So James May has been doing his own travel shows, and like he'll go to Japan, and they're like, "What in the world is James May doing?" He's sort of a foil in these for the comedy effect. He has his own like cooking in the kitchen show, and he literally has a pantry with the door closed. And when the recipe gets too hard, he goes into the pantry and brings out the woman chef to help him. And I'm like, I have so many problems with this in terms of the symbolism, what it signifies, etc. And
who checked off on that? Like that's a very
they did. I mean, you can see, you'll even see content pieces that get produced by like grocery brands, and they're working with chefs who are like watching somebody fumble and fail in the kitchen, and they're sitting off camera or in the next room like making fun of them. I'm like, that's not bringing people along. It's using essentially being mean to like generate entertainment, and that's not what we're interested in. So I came up with the idea of WTAF and said, well, let's go do it ourselves, because I thought of the vision that I have for Alice Riot, how I want to spend my time. I'm like, great, bring a camera along and we'll capture stories as we go. And we couldn't obviously do it in 2020 because couldn't travel. Still tough in 2021. And so we did these preludes where I just did Zoom interviews with different people from the art world.
Okay.
Because I wanted to make sure that we're bringing the art piece in, because even on that food and travel programming, occasionally Bourdain would like visit with an artist or have a guest as part of an episode, but there wasn't a continuous thread through it in terms of art. And so we're like, okay, we know that 8% of Michelin stars go to women chefs. We know that only 2% of auction sales in the traditional art world are works by women artists. And usually the auction sale model in the traditional art world, they aren't earning a royalty. Somebody else is pocketing the money on the resale of their work. So we know that all those numbers are ugh. But we're like, but we want to influence someone. I want someone to watch an episode of WTAF and get inspired to travel herself, not be afraid of travel. I want her to go make a reservation at a restaurant, even though it's going to be more expensive. This is a work of art by a Michelin star chef. Experience it, get inspired, go see this artwork, go collect the artwork, make an investment in art. Or if you have these talents and you have been ignoring them since your teenage years, and this sparks something in you to go and create something yourself or get something started or launch a business, go. I mean, that's what we ultimately want out of this.
So is your ideal consumer a woman, or are you also trying to bring viewers from every gender and walk of life?
I will not say which production company it was, but I had a meeting once I had this idea and I pitched them the idea. And the first piece of reaction they gave me was, don't forget about the guys. Okay. And I was like, this is for women. If men enjoy it and men want to experience it and be a part of it and want to be in support of supporting the growth of women artists and chefs, great. But I'm not building this for somebody who already gets his fill of Bourdain or Rosenthal or Chang or Zimmern or any of them. That programming exists. They've got the corner on like 90% of the programming is already built for them. So we're building this for someone who has enjoyed that programming, but hasn't necessarily seen herself in it. That's what we're looking at.
I just think it's interesting because I feel like so many programs that are geared towards women, they get stuck in this little box of, oh, this is women programming, where, talk about the growth of women chefs and women artists and all of these experiences. Well, if men aren't experiencing those things as well and being exposed to those things, it's not going to have the quickest growth because it's just women being like, you need to support women. And how many times have we heard that? Like, it's exhausting in a way.
It's totally exhausting. I'm exhausted saying it half the time.
It's so
well, and one of the things we want to do, and it didn't really come through. So our first episode dropped earlier this month. We finally were able to make a trip. I went to New York, filmed the first episode. And, it was just getting our sea legs on doing this. And my goal, and since we did that, I now have a co-producer and a co-host, and we're going to do Jamaica together.
Cool.
We're going down in October to film that second episode. That'll drop US Thanksgiving Day. But that episode ended up being far more about talking about those disparities than I wanted it to. Mm-hmm. I actually don't want to spend any time on camera talking about the disparaging, the data points. And I want us to just do it like we're doing, like seriously. And I say Bourdain, it's not trying to be a Bourdain show, but I want it to be a show where we are paying attention to what is awesome and fantastic about these artists and chefs. I don't even want to say that they're women. Right. Obviously they are. We don't have to say it, and so we intend as we go here to evolve more and more into that place where we're not talking about, oh, there's only, 2 Michelin star chefs in this city that are women. It's just going to be a matter of, we're going to go into their restaurants and eat the meals and talk with them and have a great time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't want to reveal too much about your first episode, but after speaking with you, like I'm brought back to this moment of the chef in Brooklyn. I can't think of her name, from Iran, right?
Chef Nassim Alakhani.
Okay.
Yep. So
and she had a moment where she was talking about launching this amazing restaurant that like you can't even get a reservation at 60, and calling her mom and saying, hey mom, like I'm excited about this. I'm going to do this. And then her mom having this almost like reverse reaction of, why are you doing this? Like, don't you have other things to do with your life? And then, the same reaction of you following the traditional path in your 20s and kind of that same traditional mindset and breaking away from it. So I think that was really cool to see throughout that process.
She is so inspirational, Chef Nassim. She and her husband spent a good deal of time traveling the world before they started a family.
Yeah.
And
Which like goals.
oh my gosh, the stories that she shared, well beyond what made it into the final cut, were hilarious. Just and I think we have, we like to, put them, again, like you were saying, we put them in a box. Oh, we had a fun girls' weekend. Why can't we just say we had a great trip?
Right.
Why do we have to, like, we always want to contextualize when it's ladies' night or the girls getting together, or we have to, think differently. I'm already now, I'm even going into sports, and we've got to have pink jerseys. The Vikings are not a pink team, they're purple. I'm gonna wear a purple jersey.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
So this idea, I'm optimistic that we're evolving, especially I think and I'm looking at Gen X as the generation for this. We're getting into our 50s. My mom she started calling herself a senior citizen when she was 52. I'm 51.
Hell no.
I'm not, no,
No.
I'm going to go jump out of a plane when I'm 52. I'm not going to call myself a senior citizen. And so I think on everything from beauty standards to careers to ageism to entrepreneurial, interests, I'm excited by what women are going to do within this generation. And I want us to be looking at the younger generations and encouraging them to be even bolder than we can be. Because I have no time to defend myself being female.
Right. Yeah. Well, talk to me a little bit about like the actual creation of the production of the show. Cause like you said, that's not your wheelhouse necessarily. I mean, public relations is such a huge part of production and creating a great show. So that side is, I mean, you can't find a better combo, but how did you actually go to finding a producer and editor and director and bootstrapping this thing yourself, really?
Yeah, I first of all went to my LinkedIn network and did that little search on everyone I was connected with and saying, who do I know who runs in this space? And a lot of them are people I know. I mean, one of my best friends does, she works at WGBH in Boston, and she runs Pledge. And she was at Twin Cities Public Television prior to that. She comes out of that whole space. I actually also went to a friend of mine. We worked together at Best Buy, and Best Buy had an in-house production arm called Yellow Tag Productions. And she was on the Yellow Tag team and now has her own business. And so I just went to people I knew in my network and said, I've got this. What are the things I need to do next? Because I taught myself how to write a pitch Bible just by reading through what I saw. And, the whole build around WTAF is that each location is selected first and foremost because I know somebody there.
Okay.
So, I talk about Bangkok as an example. Dr. Lakeisha Ransom is a former colleague at Best Buy and teaches at the American Technical University there, teaches entrepreneurialism, and we're friends. And so I'll go there, meet up with her. Together, we're going to go and look at some art, and we're going to go to some interesting places, and we're going to meet these chefs and go have a great meal. And so I had the idea kind of like the sequencing for each episode in mind. And then literally it was like, okay, what can I do now? I can't travel right now. So I'm going to, I did a couple of cold calls and said, would you give me some advice? There's a production company out in LA called Rebel Media. And they're, the team there came out of Viacom, MTV, et cetera. Yeah. And they're doing female driven production and content. Okay. And, had other people in my network asking for advice. And the number one thing I kept hearing is the average production company is getting about 200 pitches a month of ideas. Everybody's got an idea. Mm-hmm. You need to move past a concept. You need a product, and you need to have that product so that people can see what your vision is, not just on the pitch Bible. I think social media has raised the stakes on this.
For sure.
And so it ended up being, okay, what can I scrape from here that I would have invested in Alice Riot or put into long-term investments? And I'm self-funding it.
Yeah, we're really hard.
Talking right now about, it's produced under Alice Riot LLC. Diana and I are talking about launching WTAF Productions and having a production company for it. We're just literally stumbling forward as we go, because I don't want to just sell the idea. and have some production company take it away and turn it into something like, here, put it in that women's box.
Yeah.
You know, we want to keep the ownership of it, and then we want to license it to the streaming companies or to the networks or whatever that might be.
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, once you sell it too, you're kind of off of it. I mean, I had a similar experience of, okay, great. Like, let's take this concept and let's go get this, like, word for word, like, big boobed, like, hot celebrity to host it. You're like, did you listen to anything I said? Like, that was not the concept or at all. Like, there's more of a story here. But it's this weird dichotomy of, I also just don't think that people want to see content like that all the time anymore. This isn't 2007. It's not 1995. No. Like, it's just a different time. People want authentic things.
We want authenticity. We want to see ourselves in what we watch and consume. I mean, I'm delighted Diana is on board, because frankly, I don't want to just sit and watch a white woman travel. I mean, that there are so many important conversations in the art world, in life, that we have to have, that having someone with her deep experience in travel and living around the world, and she looks very different than me, and she grew up in Jamaica. She brings a facet and a depth to what we can tell in terms of stories that is great. And you're right. If we were to sell this idea to a network, pretty sure they wouldn't want us to host it. You know, thank you for your idea. And now we're going to go find, you know, someone who's 28 and looks a certain way. And we're like, no, we're going to keep it ourselves.
That's really cool. I love that. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, what are some of the unseen challenges that you have experienced in this that are not shown on camera? Because the production value is awesome, by the way. Like, it's really great. You. It really is great.
Well, and that was, I mean, we did that whole episode, stem to stern, 10 grand.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean,
shooting in New York is hard with so many sounds to get like great audio. That's something that people don't realize. Like, shooting in New York is really difficult.
It's really difficult. And I will tell you, I mean, and I love working with people who are always striving for it to be better. We actually aren't very happy with the sound on that one. We're like, well, that kind of sucked. Like, you can't really, like, shit, that really, damn it. No, that was, you know, I'm like, I'm all about, like, how can we do things and be nimble and not have to build a big, because I've been in places where you've got a giant team and that just creates inertia and everyone needs to sign off on it. And we want to be able to move fast and light. And so I keep challenging Diana on future shoots. I'm like, can't we just shoot this on our phones? Do we really need a whole, she's like, you need the sound, you need, you know, she brings that experience that I don't have. And so, and, you know, and I think after doing PR for 30 years, everyone thinks they can do PR. So, and so I'm trying to be very mindful and going, I don't know how to do this. So I'm going to listen to Diana, or I'm going to listen to Angie, our editor, or, you know, I'm going to take the cues from people who know how to do this.
Yeah.
But I'm going to constantly challenge us to be nimble and keep it cost effective, since we're doing it ourselves. And we're really in this chicken and the egg moment right now. We don't have 10 episodes in the can to then take to a service for licensing, because they're going to want the whole set. Yeah. We're going to have 2 by the end of the year, and then all of our social stuff. And then we're just going to go into the next year, and we've got certain conversations that are lined up. You know, I'm reluctant to want to take on investors, because that just creates different demands. But we think that this is an important avenue to go down. We don't know what it's going to look like 2 years from now, but if we can start to get more of these stories out front and center and get people engaging with them, all boats rise.
Yeah. From a PR perspective, how do you get people to engage with them?
Oh my God.
That's the magic question.
It's we all want to question. Listen, I can articulate the story of WTAF. I can articulate the story of Alice Riot. I can do all of that, but man, doing it from yourself, like that whole idea of, you know, shoemakers' children have no shoes. I am the worst at doing PR. for my own things.
No way.
I'm awful at it. It's like the person who, I actually knew someone years and years ago who cleaned homes for a living. She cleaned mansions, and her own home was just like chaos. And I think sometimes we're so good at helping others with our skills, and we don't know how to put our skills to use for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still learning on how to do that. The PR though around WTAF has been, right now we need to drive eyeballs. We need more people to watch, give us feedback, etc. The preludes that we did in 2021 were a good investment in that space because we had Jerry Saltz, for instance. He's the chief art critic at New York Magazine. So there's an episode of me and Jerry talking about what's happening in the art world. And I'm asking him questions from a collector's perspective. And it was hilarious. And, and just knowing that he is watching and liking things as we go, I'm like, it takes time to grow. And are we viral? No. I don't think we're going to be some sort of a viral thing. That's not what we're going for. We're going for something that we want to have stand the test of time.
Yeah. How do you balance that from your like ego and professional experience of knowing like how much effort goes into creating something like this and being okay with like, all right, well, it's not going to go viral?
I'm lucky in that I come from a school of thought on PR that is about outcomes driven. So okay. I've never been a PR person who is like, oh my God, we got to get as many impressions right now as possible and as many, stories on this news cycle as we can. That isn't what has motivated the work, because I've, done more probably issues management and crisis work where you don't want the media coverage. So I'm really good at shutting things down,
okay,
which probably doesn't help when you're trying to build something to reach consumers. I suck at it. But I mean, and anyone who's watching this or listening to this who worked with me at Best Buy is going to be like, oh shit, she's telling the Black Friday story again. But my joke has always been, I was a member of the PR team at Best Buy. You didn't want me on the Black Friday, like get people excited for the holidays team, because I was the one going, is everyone going to be safe in that line waiting out the store? Are they going to rush the doors? Is someone going to get trampled? Do we have a standby statement for that? Oh my God. I'm working through, like, it's like therapy, going to like, we can be optimistic and good on things.
Yeah. You can throw things at the wall and see what sticks and make things
I can happen. Say that I like a painting, and I can have a friend make a skirt out of it and say, okay, well, let's keep following this and see where it goes.
And that's really like, art, that's what art is. It's all subjective. And that's what production is in a sense too. Like not every single person's going to like everything you do. I mean, hopefully one day you're having Phil type fans like defend you on Instagram, but
I want to meet the guy. I think that he strikes me as like a marvelous human being.
Oh, I'm sure. And he creates amazing shows. Like he creates gold on television for sure. From like a production, writing, directing side too. So it's definitely interesting.